Okay, it's 9:50. I was told to wait for 10 minutes, so apologies for that. But I guess we are ready to start. Thank you for coming this morning. We are going to be talking about monitoring Alfresco with open source tools. My name is Miguel Rodriguez. I'm a technical account manager for Alfresco. I joined Alfresco 3 years ago, and I'm based here in the UK in the Maidenhead office. So, today we are going to be talking about the objective of monitoring, how we are going to do that by using open source tools. We're going to do a demonstration of the tools that we're going to be using, and we will have some time for questions and answers at the end, but you can obviously interrupt if you want to ask any questions during the presentation. So why do we want to monitor our systems? Basically, we want to know what is happening. As we know, Alfresco, or pretty much any standard solution, involves many nodes, many logs, many services, and having to monitor them manually is pretty hard. You don't want to be logging in and out of servers and opening files and doing searches individually. So we want to have a system that can help us to do all this monitoring, and we want to know what's happening anywhere in the solution, not just a specific node. By understanding what is happening, we can start preventing issues. If I can see the overall solution and I can see what resources are being used during peak hours, during other times of the day, I can start predicting how much resources I need, what people are doing during the day, and that will help me to make sure that the solution has those resources available during the hours that I need them. For example, disk space, memory, CPU, things like that, database connections. So the objective is to keep the environment running healthy, but the really most important objective is to keep the business users happy, because those are the ones that are going to be logging the cases against me. I need to make sure that the solution is running good and well for them. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to provide a lot of information, put it together into a monitoring system. But we need to be careful because all this information needs to be interpreted. There's no point of gathering lots of information and no one knows how to read or translate this data into some meaningful way. So what do we really want out of this monitoring system? What we want is near real-time updates. If something happens on the solution anywhere on any of the nodes, I want to know about it as soon as possible. I don't want to wait 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 day or two to find out that I run out of disk space. I want to know before it happens. And I want to be able to monitor large systems. I don't want to look at just one node. Alfresco normally has like 5, 6 nodes, as I said, with many log files, and that's your production system, but you also have your QA environment, your pre-production environment. We can monitor all those systems at once. So the solution has to be able to monitor many nodes at once. And we need to be able to customize reporting, because different people will have different needs. Different administrators will be looking at different areas of the solution. Some people might look at the operating system, some people might look at the database or Alfresco. So our monitoring solution has to be able to customize how the data is going to be presented to different type of people or different groups. And we need to provide a custom search mechanism that runs across the solution. So if I do a search for errors, I want to search for errors on every log file, every node, wherever it is available. I just want to make sure that my searches are global. And then I can go deep into a single node or single log file. But initially, my searches for errors or for any type of queries needs to be global. So it has to be a flexible system. So as I said, I need to be able to customize the reporting. I need to be able to monitor new things. As I introduce new things into the solution, I need to be able very quickly to add new nodes that I want to monitor or new services or whatever I want to change. So it has to have some flexibility. And of course, we want to use open source tools because they are free, because they update very frequently, so it is really a good solution to use. So the solution that we are going to see today is completely free. We will make it available to you. You can download it and use it. It's not developed by Alfresco. I put it together myself, but it's not an Alfresco product. So there's no support directly from Alfresco. I can help you to set it up. I can give you some tips, but it's completely open source. You can download it, everything, and it's totally free. So it's up to you if you want to use it. So what is the challenge? As I said, in a standard Alfresco solution, we have at least minimum of 2 nodes on this tier. So we got the customer connecting to Alfresco through the load balancer. This is our web interface with the repository with Alfresco. We obviously have the database and the content store. And then again, through the load balancer, we can connect to the Solr search nodes, which also have Alfresco nodes running on the same host for tracking. So as you can see, there's many nodes, and obviously each node will have many log files. We have the share log file, Alfresco log file, again, Alfresco log, Solr logs, the logs provided by the database, by the operating system. So there's many things that we want to monitor, and this is the challenge. And this is just, let's say, the production environment. As I said, we have QA, pre-production. We have many environments that we need to monitor. So the solution comes as a bundle of open source tools. I put them in 3 different groups. The first one is logstash, Elasticsearch, and Kibana. Logstash is a Java tool. What it does is it can tail log files real time, and it can execute custom commands. For example, you want to execute top on a Linux operating system. And the output of those commands, the log files and the commands, is sent to Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is a Lucene server. So what it's going to do is going to index the log files. It's going to index the commands that or the output from the commands that we send to it, and store it into a Lucene or Solr search engine. And we are going to use Kibana 3 as the front end to display the data, to query the data, and to see all the nodes at once. So that's the first tool we are going to use. The second tool is made of logstash, Graphite, and Grafana. And what we do is we collect and display numeric data. For example, the amount of CPU or the amount of disk space or how much traffic goes through our networks. So again, we use logstash to collect the data because it can execute commands on a predetermined time sets. And we are going to store the data into Graphite, which is a database for numeric purposes. And Grafana is going to be the front end we are going to use to display all the data. And the last one we are going to use is Icinga. And Icinga is just a fork of Nagios, which is a well-known monitoring system. I think they forked Nagios because the development of Nagios was a bit too slow and they wanted to go faster. So I decided to go for Icinga, but you can also install Nagios or something like that. So what they do is, Icinga does is monitors all the servers and services, maybe by using things like the RMI port. And it sets some thresholds. So if we reach a threshold, for example, the amount of memory left is X value, then it can send alerts to an administrator or group administrators. So we are going to get notifications in an automatic way. We don't need to be monitoring the systems. The system is going to tell us what's happening if there's any problems. This is a simplified view of the solution. On the left-hand side, we got, let's say, our Alfresco nodes, the database server, the content store, all the nodes that are running Alfresco. On the right-hand side, we got a virtual machine that is running all the monitoring tools. So what we have done is we put all the tools outside Alfresco because we don't want to take the resources from the Alfresco solution. It has to be independent of Alfresco. The only thing that runs on the Alfresco nodes or the database server is the logstash agent. As I said, the logstash will be tailing the log files, it will be executing commands, and will be pushing the data to the monitoring virtual machine. In the same way, Icinga will be sending requests to the Alfresco nodes via the RMI ports, and will be gathering data, and based on the threshold that we configure in Icinga, we can send email notifications to the administrators. So what I have done is I put this monitoring solution together by using Packer. Packer is an open source tool that what it does is able to create the operating system, install it, and install all the applications on top of that. So it's completely automated. It's just one command that they execute, and it will install everything for you. Packer is available from this URL. And what it does, it can create virtual machines for different types of infrastructures like VirtualBox or VMware or Amazon machines. So if, for example, I'm going to create a virtual machine for VirtualBox to run my monitoring solution, I will install Packer and VirtualBox, run the command, I will install everything. And it will, at the end of it, it will provide me with the VirtualBox virtual machine, the files that I need to run that, and everything will be installed automatically as a service. Once you start the virtual machine, everything will be up and running. So what I did is created a project in GitHub. Let me show you. I don't have internet. Okay, so this project is about 400 and something megabytes. Oh, you cannot see much in there, sorry. And it's under Miguel Rodriguez Alfresco monitoring. And all you have to do is click on the download zip file, and it will download all the files that are used by Packer. So what I have here is a set of templates that will tell Packer how to install the operating system and how to install all the tools that we are going to use for monitoring. So everything will be automated. As I said, this is completely free. You can download it and use it if you want. Okay, so let's do a quick demo. I'm gonna go, as you can see, this is just my browser, so it's a HTML browser interface. So I'm gonna go into full screen mode so you can see better. So this front end is Kibana. Kibana is just, let me make it a bit bigger. So Kibana is the front end for Elasticsearch, which is the Lucene search engine. So as I said, all the log files and all the commands are going to be indexed, put into Elasticsearch, and Kibana will query Elasticsearch. So just to tell you what the components are here, on the top we have a time picker, so we can decide how much data we are going to visualize based on whatever time slot we choose. And also has an auto refresh. So as you can see there, it's refreshing every 30 seconds. So the data that goes into the search engine can be obtained in an automatic way. And you can, of course, just run custom time slots if you want. And also has the option to load the configuration that you see here, this display, this dashboard. You can create your own, and they can be loaded into your browser by just choosing the one that you want to use. So every administrator can create their own, and they can be just loaded using that. The configuration here, there's no hard-coded at all. Everything is done via this web interface. So you can change it very quickly just by clicking on settings. You can go into rows, you can add a new row, and then on that row you can add a new panel. You can tell the panel which queries you want to run, and everything, you save it, and it's available for you later. So there's no hard-coded values behind this. Everything is done via the front end, which is quite handy. So the next thing we have here is a search box. So whatever queries we type here, they will go into the Lucene server. It will try to find the data and will return the data to us. For example, if I type error, I've got nothing because it's just on the last hour. I probably haven't been doing anything the last hour. As I type error, I can find all the errors that are stored in the Lucene search that come from my log files. It will also tell me which host it comes from. In this case, I only have one Alfresco node because it's running on my laptop, so I don't have too much power to run more. And it will tell me also which path or which file is coming from. So it's coming from my Alfresco 42212 and the alfresco.log file. All I did just was to type error and do a search. And it's retrieving all the data that comes from any of the hosts, any of the files, even if it is a database log, anything, and it will be presented to me. So what we see here is the histogram. The histogram has got some predefined queries. I will show you how to create these queries, like info messages, warnings, errors, exceptions, Java null pointers, fatal messages, out of memory, too many open files, Solr queries, and things like that. So I can create queries, I can save the queries using the interface, And then those queries, which are listed there, can be used on any of the little panels. For example, if I want to create a new query, I just click on the plus sign on the top right. It just opens a new box. For example, I type license, and then I press on the orange little icon. I call it license, and just click on pin. As you can see, on the top right-hand side is a new little box, which is a safe query that is called license. And now I can use that new query on any of my panels. So if I go to query, I click on license, it gets selected, it gets saved. The new search is there, and it's telling me that in this time span, I got one entry from one of the log files that contains the word license. So that way you can very easily customize what each panel is going to use by creating your own queries, saving them, and then using them individually in different panels. So it's very flexible the way, and very easy the way that you create customized searches. So if I now delete that, go back to normal. As I said, logstash, which is the agent that runs on Alfresco, it will be tailing the log files and pushing the data there, but can also execute commands. It will execute commands on the operating system, and the output of those commands I send it back to Elasticsearch. And I can create this panel where I display those commands, how many times they have been executed. For example, I run Java stack traces every 5 minutes because I want to know what is happening inside the Java application. If I start having performance problems, I can quickly go to my Java stack traces and find out what's happening inside. In this case, for example, if I click on the Java stack column, which is that yellow one, what happens? It creates a filter. The filter applies to all the panels at the same time, and it's only going to retrieve my Java stack traces. Let me show you. I'm going to stop the auto refresh because it becomes a bit annoying. So this is just a table that contains the results of my queries. As you can see, it's only a bit of the data that gets displayed, it's not the full Java stack trace, and this is not part of the Java stack trace. So what I do is I just click on that entry, and it does expand, and it will show me the full entry, the full Java stack trace. So I can also customize, as you saw, how much data I'm going to be showing on the table by just clicking on it. Then I get the full data set. So it's very easy to customize the viewing or the reporting of the data. So if I remove the filter, I get all my data back. The box on the right is called trends, and what it does, it tells you how all these searches vary over time. So you can configure and say, well, tell me how the searches have changed from the previous day to today, whether I get more errors, less errors, or different type of information. So it's just another way of displaying data. So different people will want to see different data in different ways. Another interesting thing, for example, if I type error, I can see I've got 108 errors, and that's, well, okay, it's 108. Here I can see 109 being retrieved. Something I can do is, if you click on this little icon in there, it will expand the Java classes. And what I get is a count, as you can tell here, a number count of all the messages per class. So these are classes that are throwing errors, because that's the query I type. And I can see which classes are throwing the errors. So it is very easy for me, if I want to, for example, look at the database transaction errors only, I click on the magnifying glass in there, and what it does is filters out all the data by just displaying the errors that come from the JDB transaction. So again, it's very quick and very easy to zoom into specific classes, specific errors, and I can see when the error happens. So the error happened at that point in time. Something very nice also is that you can click on the histogram, and then you can zoom in and out of it. For example, if I close this, I got 12 hours of data there. I can zoom in, and I can see the data moving over time. So it's very easy to navigate over different periods of time and then just zoom in into a specific point in time. So yeah, and this is just the table that displays all the data. The table can be configured very easily. And you can specify, for example, how many items you want to display on each page and what is the maximum number of pages, therefore the maximum number of results you are going to retrieve from the Lucene search engine. So all that can be customized if you don't want to retrieve too much data at once. So this is just Kibana. This is, as I said, this is the front end for all this text data that we push into the Elasticsearch server. And we can use that to obtain all that data. So the next tool I use is called Grafana. Grafana is the front end for Graphite. Graphite is the database that stores all the numerical data. Grafana can display all these values in a nice way, as we can see. It's very similar to Kibana interface. So again, you can configure everything from the front end. So there's no hard-coded values. Everything is configured from here. You can create more rows and add more panels on each of the rows. Each of these panels can be displayed in full screen size if you want to look at the data in more detail. And you can also edit them, and you can decide which data is going to be displayed on each of these panels. So very easy to add a new entry, and then you choose which kind of metric you want to display. As I said, everything is done from the front end. So obviously you can add as many panels as you want. In this case, because I only have one Alfresco node, I'm just showing information for one node. Just to go through the information I normally collect to monitor Alfresco. Obviously, you want to know the Java JVM heap memory usage. So I collect a few metrics, how much is being used by the JVM, which is that brown line, and then by the different areas of the JVM, the hidden, the permanent, and the all areas. So I can see how often the garbage collections are happening and how much is my all generation JVM usage. So very good. Obviously, if I got more nodes, I could display how much memory is used for every node in one single diagram if I wanted to. So I can see if one of the nodes is going crazy, then I can look at that very quickly. But I only have one node, so everything is here. The next one is showing me the memory, the physical memory on the server. So this is on the Java, on the JVM, which is running Alfresco, but this is the physical server. I've got 16 gigabytes of memory, or nearly 16 gigabytes of memory, and I can tell how much memory I've got left because it's that line in there. So it's telling me about the physical memory, the total available, and how much is free, and also about the swap. So I don't have much memory left. So, if I was running Alfresco, I would probably need more memory on this server. The next one is about the CPU of the server running Alfresco. So the top line is telling me how much CPU is idle. So pretty much everything is idle. I'm not doing anything on Alfresco, so it's hardly doing anything. The green line is the CPU used by Alfresco. So I can tell when there's spikes. If I load data or anything, I will see that going up and down. And I also can display how much of the CPU is used by the system or by user tasks. For example, OpenOffice will be a user task, and if OpenOffice is running and using a lot of CPU, I will see the user CPU going up quite a lot. I can monitor the transactions going in Solr. We've got transactions and ACLs. As you know, Solr keeps tracking Alfresco. Every time we add new documents or new ACLs to Alfresco, they go into the database, and Solr keeps tracking those transactions. So if I go, for example, let me see, the last 12 hours. This is an example where Solr stopped tracking transactions for a while. So I added some documents to Alfresco. I saw that because the blue line is the transactions on the server. So that's on Alfresco. And the brown line is the transactions on the index. So I saw that Alfresco at this point wasn't indexing, but eventually it came back. It wasn't indexing because I stopped tracking just to demonstrate that once it's not indexing, you can see the difference. So you can tell if your Solr nodes are running behind Alfresco in terms of indexing content, new content. And the same for ACLs. The next one is about how many documents we have in Alfresco. Solr has a different terminology for documents. Inside Solr, a document is not the same as an Alfresco document. A document could be a transaction referencing other documents inside Solr. This blue line indicates how many nodes or Alfresco documents are in my Solr installation, and this is how many documents Solr has created. As you can see, it's a big difference, but sometimes we talk about how many documents are inside Solr. It doesn't mean Alfresco nodes, but documents. And so it's quite different, and you need to be aware of those things. But we can see if I add content or I delete content, how those entries change over time. Other things I monitor, for example, is the response time of the Solr searches. Solr has multiple searchers. In here we can see we got the Alfresco full text search, the Alfresco search, which is the Lucene, or the CMIS search handler. So depending on the type of queries you are running, they will be using one or the other search handlers inside Solr, and this will give me the average response time per searcher. Obviously, if my searches are slowing down, the response time will go up, and I know that I have a problem in Solr because it's not responding fast enough. So at that point, I need to investigate. Is it because I'm running out of resources? Is it because the queries are not well formed? They're using wildcards, and therefore it takes a long time to retrieve all the data. But it's a good point to know when things are happening. Here I was running a query with a wildcard. It was just A star, and obviously my searcher went, not crazy because it was only 300 milliseconds, but it went quite high. So the next one tells me about the concurrent users on the system, or concurrent number of tickets. As you log into the system, we can tell how many users are connected to Alfresco, and also how many tickets. As you know, every time you connect to Alfresco, Alfresco or Share will give you a ticket back that you can use for additional requests. So this will tell you how many users and how many tickets are being used in Alfresco, which is quite interesting because depending on how you have configured your Tomcat threads, you can start thinking whether you're going to run out of threads if you have too many users on the system. So you can use that information to understand how your system is running in terms of threads and resources. So if I look at Tomcat threads, I have configured 200 threads, which is that line over there, and I can tell how many people are connected to Share, how many of those threads are busy. At the moment, obviously, no one running on my system, so it's pretty much down. It's not doing anything. But during peak hours, you will see your number of users, concurrent users going up, and obviously your threads will be reaching maybe the maximum number of threads. So you need to be careful. Obviously, if you have more than 200 concurrent users using the system, there are going to be no threads left, and they will have to wait for Tomcat to have new threads available. So you will see a slow on your system, slowing down. So this will help you to monitor the number of users and the number of threads available and being used. I can also look at things like resources like the disk I/O or the network usage. For example, if I'm doing a bulk upload, I can monitor how fast my disk is working. This obviously will help me also during merge operations of Solr, which are quite disk intensive. So I can see whether the disk operations are fast enough or not. So it will help me to understand the kilobyte reads per second and the kilobytes write per second. So it's just additional information. I can also look at the open file handles. As you know, on any operating system, every time you run a task, it will start using file handles. And there's a limitation on how many file handles you can use on an operating system. So I can tell, depending on what operations are doing, whether the system is using more or less file handles. And also on Kibana, I can display exactly which ones are being used. So I can correlate the information I display here with the information I have in Kibana. If I'm running out of file handles, I think by default I've got it configured to 65,000, so I'm quite far away from that. But if this goes up to, let's say, 30,000, then I can go to Kibana and find out exactly what is being used by my application, whether maybe I'm leaking file handles, I'm not closing the files correctly. So this will help me to understand how the resources are being used. And the last one I used is the database pool. So I have configured 275 connections on my Alfresco, meaning that my Alfresco instance can only use up to 275 concurrent database connections. Obviously, there's just one connection being used because Alfresco is just only up and running. But as you get more users, again, your connections will go up depending on the number of concurrent users. But if they are reaching the maximum number of connections, which is 275, you know you are going to have problems because you will have to wait for the connections and your system will be slow. So hopefully all this information, which you can show for every node, will help you to understand how your resources are being used. And mainly during peak hours when you got all the users, you can tell whether you're going to be running out of resources or not, and it will help you to understand whether you need to increase the size of your solution depending whether it is memory, disk, or maybe the number of Solr servers that you need, anything. I also take a look at the Solr caches. It's quite important to configure the caches properly because obviously they're going to help you to speed up your searches. We use a different number of caches in Solr, and I can monitor them because these values come from the RMI service in Alfresco. So what I can look is mainly to the cumulative hit ratio. That tells me whether my cache is being used properly or not. So if the value is between 0 and 100, 100 being the maximum, if it is 100, it means it's being used very well. If it is very low, it means it's not being used. For example, the cumulative hit ratio for the Alfresco cache is 100. And also need to look at the number of inserts and evictions. Because if I got, like in this one, I've got a hit ratio of 17, which is quite low. But I got a lot of inserts and a lot of evictions. It means it's not being used properly. If I look at my lookups, I only have 34 lookups, meaning 34 searches were only using this cache. But at the same time, I'm doing a lot of inserts and deletes. So this cache is not well configured right now for my solution. I'm not using the cache properly. So I would need to think, well, do I need this cache or not? So we have different caches, and you can tell how they're being used and whether you need to configure them in a different way. And the last one is, the last tool is Icinga. As I said, Icinga is a fork of Nagios. What it tells us is, depending on the, so I can go to the map, depending on the number of Alfresco nodes you have installed, they will appear on this map. I only have one. And it can tell you what services are running fine inside Alfresco, or which ones have critical messages. We need to thank Tony de la Fuente for providing the plugin for Nagios, which works very well also on Icinga. So what we do is, some of these checks will run against the Alfresco RMI port or service, and they will take a value from that service. And we will set thresholds for warning or critical. And when we reach these thresholds, Icinga will send you an email notification. So you can configure a number of users or groups of administrators, and they can get email notifications when these thresholds are reached. If we look at one of them, for example, the free memory, let me maximize that a little bit. As you can see, all it is doing is running a check Alfresco command, or check Alfresco memory. It's using the port 5500, which is our RMI port, using the username and password. And it's got a threshold of 400 and 200, meaning if my memory goes down to 400, send me a warning. If it goes down under 200 megabytes available, then send me a critical message. So I can configure, it's just a config file in Icinga, for every service what my thresholds are. That way I can control, obviously, I got just a default set of values, but you will need to configure this depending on your application, how much memory and disk space sticks you have. But this will tell the administrators what is happening on your solution without you having to log into the solution and having a look. You will get an email telling you whether any of your hosts, any of your services, or any of your resources are running critical or not. Once you know that something is happening, then you log in, take a look at the logs, take a look at the performance on the resources, and you should be able to pretty much find out what's happening on your nodes. And that's pretty much it. So this is just some references to the software that I use. As I said, I use Elasticsearch, which is the Lucene index server, logstash for tailing logs and executing commands. Graphite is a database for storing numerical data. Grafana is the front end. Stats.The is a broker for getting all this numerical data from many servers before the data is then distributed to the Graphite database. Same as Redis, it's just a broker for getting all this content from logstash, and then it flashes the data into Elasticsearch. So we can work with multiple nodes pushing data into these servers. And then Icinga, which is the Nagios fork. And that's it. That's my email address. So if you have any questions about how to configure, how to set it up, send me an email. As I said, it's not officially supported by Alfresco because it's not an Alfresco application, but I will do my utmost to help you setting it up or understanding how it works. And if you have any questions, yes, please.
In terms of the data source for the file handles or the Solr caches,
yep.
And on the black screen with all the on the numerical graphs and everything,
yep.
Is the source all for JMX for all of those things? And the second question on that is, with the Solr data, is that actually also just coming from the Alfresco app?
Okay, the data that is stored in, okay. So all this data comes from Graphite, which is a database that is installed on the virtual machine that does the monitoring. Some of the data comes from the operating system. For example, how much memory I've got on my operating system. What I do is I use logstash to execute a command, and then I parse the output, and I send the numbers into Graphite, and then I use Grafana to display that data. Logstash does everything. It does the tailing of the log files, and it pushes the output of the tailing into Elasticsearch, and it can execute commands, and I get the output of the commands. I can format that output, and then send it to Graphite just as a numeric value.
What about the threads and the concurrent users? How does that get?
That comes from the RMI service in Alfresco. So we use the port 5500 and the username and password. Then we query one of the entries, get the data out, get the numeric values, and push it into Graphite. So it just executes commands on predefined intervals. If I very quickly show you one of the log files, you can see what it looks like. So as you can see here, this is the configuration file for logstash. It's tailing all my Alfresco log files. I forgot to show you something about auditing. It's quite good. So I can tail any file, whether it is Alfresco or not. And I can execute commands. For example, give me the memory that is on the server, execute that on an interval of 3,600 seconds. And this is the command I execute is this one, echo server memory, and the date, and free. So I can put any command I want, execute it, and send the output to Kibana.
This configuration is on the monitoring server? Or
no. Okay, so this is what it runs on the Alfresco node. So on Alfresco node, we run logstash, which uses this configuration to be able to tail the log files and to execute these commands. And all the output of those executions is sent to Elasticsearch.
So it's the agent, it's the client.
Yeah, it's the agent.
For
yeah.
every node you want to.
Every node will have an agent or two agents.
And the communication with the monitoring server, how is
Yeah. It's the standard output. So I tell it, go to Redis, which is running on my monitoring server, and push the data there. Simple. So everything that it gets collected, it just goes, oops, sorry, it goes there by default.
okay, it's sent.
It's sent automatically, so I don't do anything.
It's not the server.
Exactly, no. It's the agent that pushes the data when it's ready to the monitoring server.
With that many checks that you've got there, how much overhead does it create?
You can configure how much, because this is a Java application, how much memory is going to use. So you can push the MX. I normally set it to 500 to 1 gigabyte max. So, yeah.
So there's not much overhead?
No, because you can limit it. So you can say, well, if I'm executing too many commands and it's going to take too much,
yeah,
put a limit on it. Don't take all my resources. So you can configure how many commands you're going to run and how heavy they are. Yes, please.
Will this all work against the community version of Alfresco?
Yeah.
Especially
No.
JMX, I suppose, Nagios?
The RMI is used on the community, as far as I know.
JMX commands will not work.
Are they not?
You
Okay,
can't-
well,
You can't get the numbers out.
that's the answer.
Memory and everything related to the operating system
Yeah.
can work,
Okay.
not related to JMX.
Okay, so all the logs and all the commands that you execute on the operating system will work. Anything that's RMI will not work.
And maybe the GMX about Java.
Yeah.
Heap, maybe
Yeah.
threads about Tomcat or
Yeah, I mean,
not the Alfresco ones.
yeah, there's a lot of information. I use RMI because it's easy, but I'm sure you can get a lot of information from other sources, just querying the JVM itself. So it doesn't need to be, this is not hard-coded anywhere. This is the commands I run. You can change them. You can use your own commands. You can do your own monitoring. So this is just a template. It's up to you to change it. You monitor what you want to see, really.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you're using StatsD?
StatsD is like a broker. So all the data that I collect from this logstash agent or any agent that is running on any of the Alfresco nodes. Actually, it's not this one is the one that does the numeric value. That is sent to StatsD. StatsD is just a broker that will collect all that data and will flash it into Graphite. So once it's collected data, I think it's every 5 seconds, it will push the data into Graphite.
So you'd run down every node that you're watching?
Exactly. I need to run an agent on every node. So I can monitor different things on different nodes. It's not hard-coded to always monitor the same things. If you got a database server, you will monitor just one log for the database server, and you might monitor the number of connections that are running on that, and nothing else. You don't need to monitor anything else. So you can monitor different things on different servers. It's up to you. Any more questions? Are we done? All right. Thank you so much.